as you said before, people simply aren't prepared. Chicago, I believe it was Chicago, they had the food stamps, they call it the SNAP program here. It went offline for, I don't know, 24 hours. Well, people were literally rioting in the streets because they don't have food. And we have 200 of these cities in our country. People just have become so incredibly dependent on others that's why I said, you know what, hey, 150 years ago, if we had this problem, people would just shake it off, they'd suck it up, and there'd be some misery, but people would drive forward. Here, people are literally going to die or kill people because they don't know how to act. We have all this vacant farmland in Detroit, and people don't even know how to put a crop in the ground, or if they do, somebody will steal it the next day. We're going to have to get through a phase like that first day with just small problems until people can do what you're talking about in terms of being able to work together, share together, under some sort of shared calamity. That's what I worry about more than anything else, because I could see the correlations of a small problem turning into a major problem. And then if we have the major global minimum problem that we think is going to happen by 2024, is that I can't even imagine what it's going to be like.
You're talking about a single country event having that much of a ripple effect globally and internally, whatever country it occurs in. A single country event, and that's going to have that much chaos. You need to do some research, and you really need to look out and see what's happening around, because you're going to wake up one day and it's going to be here. When it snows 5 feet in front of your house, they're telling you global warming, global warming. What are you really going to do? I keep saying again and again, learn how to grow food. Learn how to repair things in your house. Learn how to contact your neighbors in emergencies. You harp on the same things again and again because we're at the cusp of it right now, and it's going to intensify. And if you look at the planetary rotations and the lineups and the geometry, and if you go back several thousand years in history, I've gone back 8,000 years doing rotational variances on the planets in different cycles, on 60-year cycles, on the 108-year cycle, on the 80-year Gleisberg cycle. And when we get into these 400-year cycles, they match up like clockwork. And it's coming back, and it had a drastic effect on every single society it's ever touched. No society has ever gone untouched. And we think we're so untouchable with our high technology right now, it makes us even more vulnerable. And Bob, I want to get your opinion on one thing. Talking about the central bank printing and the just-in-time delivery system that revolves on this quick, easy credit of 30, 60, 90 days. What if that locks up in itself because of some calamitous event in the stock market, where, as we saw in 2008 and 9, credit just dried up? So what's going to happen with the just-in-time delivery system at that point? Well,
you already see it. Look at what happened in South Korea. The shipping lines, I mean, it's going to affect retailers here, and they said it's going to be 18 months before some of this stuff gets out of those container ships.
Couldn't believe it.
Yeah, old creditors just are holding them hostage. So, I mean, that's just in South Korea. And now Deutsche Bank, close to done. What people don't realize is how everything is daisy-chained. People ask me, why do I cry out in the wilderness like that? In fact, it's funny, I was tweeting out this morning, and a really good friend of mine who doesn't share this opinion at all sent me a private and said, hey, you're starting to sound ridiculous. I shot a note back to him and said, people have believed this lie so much that it's embedded in them. And I have to get people at least to neutral, because you're starting to see people are trying to blame this Hurricane Matthew on climate change, which is, obviously a word for global warming. Well, I don't think people realize that if it wasn't for the global cooling that were happening, that cold weather event that you talked about with the snow in Saskatchewan,
it's pushing another front in front of it to steer it the other direction.
It blocked it, and look where it's now circling it in the Atlantic Gulf Stream. Well, you know what? Be thankful. And with the Atlantic starting to cool, I was on another interview with somebody in July, and I said, I'm going to make a prediction. We will not get a major hurricane in the month of August, in fact, in the month of September. I said, and they're calling for 14 named storms. And
now, Bob, it's been 4,000 days since a major hurricane had landed in the United States. 4,000 days since the last one. It's because of global warming is absolutely insane when you look at the real fact behind it.
And it only took me 15 minutes of searching data inputs for me to make that prediction. And this is the La Nina year where you should have hurricanes because the shearing doesn't happen. Well, all I did was look off the coast of the Azores, and you saw the high dust coming off the Sierra.
Satellite coming, yeah.
And then a cold pocket off the Azores. And I just said to one of the climate guys, I said, you're not going to get any hurricanes. I told it on the show I was on, you're not going to get any hurricanes. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, the same climate guy was tweeting out saying, Saharan dust and cold pocket not conducive to storms. And the only reason why Matthew formed is, as you know, everything squeezes in. This was the most southern flowing storm track of a hurricane I think they've noted. This thing skirted Venezuela to come up.
Yeah, way down near the equator. You don't get that far south. Hurricanes don't hit in Brazil. It's a rarity off southern South America.
People just don't understand correlations. And people don't realize, all they have to do is go look at, in the 1400s, that France was putting a tariff on English wine. And 3 years later, people in France and people in England were starving to death. How fast these things
That is
change.
such a fast trick. And it happens so lightning fast like that people are unprepared. It doesn't take 10 or 15 or 20 years to flip. It literally takes a year. And they've seen it through the climatic record. 2 years it's flipped. It's even occurred as fast as 9 months before that they've gotten through some climatic records on these quick shifts.
It's just some scary stuff. And I think people really need to pay attention. I look at the people that are driving this narrative for warming is that they obviously have another agenda, and I really don't want to go into it here.
Money.
They have an agenda that's really more control versus our well-being. They're going to end up killing and be responsible for the death of a lot of people. When you tell people that the ice caps are melting when they're actually at neutral to record highs, to me that it's indefensible. And people don't realize when these ice caps get stronger, the reflections get even more powerful. When you get the cold that you're getting up in the upper stratosphere, in the Arctic and the Antarctic, it causes these polar vortexes. It causes these undulations. And, you talked about this before. It's not simply a matter of it's always cold. It's these erratic jet stream moves caused by this intense cold that's up in the Arctic and the Antarctic, the upper atmospheres, that causes these anomalous jet stream events. Look at Iowa, 70 degrees.
And then it drops 40 degrees and it's freezing the night after.
Think about that happening 6 or 7 times during a growing season. Those are the kind of things that are going to happen. Florida orange growers are extremely concerned about extreme cold weather for their crops this year.
I'd done a little snippet when they came out with that forecast, and what was a misnomer headline was highlights of the 2016-17 winter. It said mild start to the winter covering Florida and the southeast United States, but then when you dug further down into the article, it talked about the concern of losses of oranges specifically. A mild start to the winter, that's pure propaganda. If it's a highlight, it should be highlighting that they're going to lose part of, or they could possibly lose part of the orange industry down there. That would be a highlight, not a mild start to the winter. And if you haven't seen or heard the news, the Arctic ice melt season this year ended 3 weeks early. Greatest expanse recovery ever recorded since the satellite era began. And the IPCC loves to come off and say, since the satellite era began, it's the warmest. Well, you know what? It's now confirmed. Since the satellite era began, this is the greatest ice increase ever recorded. So we start to see these little things start to add up. You're talking about the Arctic, the losses of oranges. They're just trying to bury it in the public psyche, and I don't know why. It should be a headline to get ready for growers and purchasers like ourselves that prices are going to go up for oranges, but it's a mild start to the winter.
Yeah, it's really a battle between the progressives who are primarily consumers trying to defund the people who are primarily producers. And so the fact that they can try to defund the oil industry and the gas industry and control those environments and control the people because of that. Henry Kissinger said, if you want to control a nation, you control their energy. If you want to control the people, you control their food. This is a 40-year project. This is an after World War II project where there's people that simply want to try to control and contain the world for what they view is for its betterment because people are too stupid. So I think, they have a plan. You could point to cold weather today, Dave, and they point to the Hurricane Matthew. But what's going to happen is going to get to a point where you can't counterpoint it. And social media today is designed to really counterpoint everything. Until you get to the point where everybody is seeing data point after data point after data point, or you see a crop fail, we're not going to get people's attention. The good thing about what we do is it's math. Either I'm going to be right or I'm going to be wrong. You're going to be right or you're going to be wrong. And these people can lie because a lot of what's happening isn't really affecting the right people yet. But once it starts affecting the right people and it starts meaning something to them, then you're going to see a shift in the psychology of the people very, very quickly. We just simply need to continue telling the good story. We believe that math and cycles are on our side. We just continue to bring the data points forward. When people say global warming, I always ask the people, I said, what year is the ideal year for us?
And their answer is?
They don't have an answer. It just shuts them up. Because you know what? You can point to any year, and I could point to a country that's in starvation. Hey, what's good for America is not good for Russia or China. What's good for Russia or China is not good for America. And the year that it was the best was the year they complained about the most, last year. So I just think the story is going to just untangle itself. We just have to be patient and keep bringing the news to people. And you and I both have shifted from telling a story to telling people what they can do about it. For me, my gift is to help people can make money or position your portfolio that you're either going to be minimize your impact or you're going to maximize your gain. And then you're telling people, hey, first of all, you got to know you have a problem. And now we got to talk about how we're going to fix those problems together. What do we need to do? And how do we help people? I didn't get into the solar business by accident. I had a purpose behind it. And, I know you've done some things in your past. You had a purpose behind it in terms of being able to empower people. And that's what I'm all about. I want to empower people. I have solar on my home. I don't want to rely on the energy company. I have a garden in my backyard. I don't want to rely on the grocery store for everything. I trade for a living because I want to make sure I understand what's going on in the stock market. And those are the kind of things that I encourage people. They need to be intentional, and they need to be purposeful, and they need to enable their passions. And they need to really understand what problem's really in front of them. Food's going to be an issue. Credit's going to be an issue. Your job is going to be an issue. So you're going to have to start thinking about these things. You don't have to be panicked about them. You just have to be thinking about them and putting plans in place to take action and be ahead of the curve, because 80% of your peers will be behind the curve. And they're going to look to you for answers, and we need to be there with those answers.